The Wild West, lawless, unforgiving, and ruled by the fastest draw. It was a time when men became legends, their names whispered in saloons and carved into history. And among them stood one of the greatest, Wild Bill Hickok, lawman, gunslinger, folk hero. His reputation was built on quick reflexes and an even quicker trigger finger. But in the end, even the fastest gunslingers meet their match. August 2nd, 1876, Deadwood, South Dakota, a small mining town teeming with prospectors, outlaws, and gamblers. Hickok enters Saloon No. 10, seeking nothing more than a friendly game of poker. He takes his seat, but in doing so, he makes a fatal mistake. He sits with his back to the room. It's a simple error, but for a man like Wild Bill, it would be the last one he ever makes. A figure moves through the crowd, silent, purposeful. The glint of steel catches the dim saloon light. And then, one gunshot, one moment. And just like that, Wild Bill Hickok is dead. But who was the man behind the trigger? And why did he want Hickok gone? This is the untold story of Wild Bill Hickok's final moments.
Put your hands up for stories untold, echoes of glory and hearts so bold. We dig deeper where the truth will glow. Forgotten history, let the rhythm flow.
Welcome back to the Forgotten History Channel, where we uncover the lost tales that shaped the world. From unsung heroes to infamous outlaws, history is filled with stories waiting to be told. If you love legendary figures, hidden truths, and historic showdowns, then make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because history is never as simple as it seems. Now saddle up and hold on tight. We're riding straight into the final chapter of Wild Bill Hickok's legendary life. Before the name Wild Bill struck fear into the hearts of outlaws, he was just James Butler Hickok, a restless boy with a sharp eye and an untamed spirit. Born in 1837 in Homer, Illinois, he was raised in a family that despised slavery, shaping his strong sense of justice. But young Hickok wasn't destined for an ordinary life. Adventure called to him, and he answered with a gun in hand. By his teenage years, Hickok had already gained a reputation as a skilled marksman. He practiced for hours in the thick Illinois woods, his eyes locked on targets, his hands steady as steel. It was this unshakable aim that would carve his name into history. When the Civil War erupted, Hickok found himself at the heart of the chaos, first as a teamster, then as a Union scout and spy. But it was after the war that his legend truly began. The frontier needed lawmen, and Hickok was more than ready to step up. In a land where outlaws ruled, he was a rare breed, a gunslinger with a badge, bringing justice with the barrel of his Colt revolver. But with every gunfight, every bounty, and every man he put in the ground, his fame became his greatest curse. Wild Bill Hickok wasn't just a lawman, he was a marked man. But fame has its price. The bigger the legend, the more enemies it attracts. And for Wild Bill Hickok, one of those enemies was a man history would have long forgotten if not for a single cowardly act. Jack McCall, drifter, gambler, and a man with nothing to lose. A failure at the card table and in life, he wandered from town to town, chasing luck that never seemed to come. He was reckless, prone to drunken outbursts, and easily slighted. But it wasn't just the whiskey fueling his anger, it was Wild Bill himself. The exact reason for McCall's grudge remains a mystery. Some say Hickok embarrassed him during a poker game, tossing him a coin and telling him to go buy breakfast after he lost everything. Others claim it was something more sinister, a job gone wrong, an old debt unpaid, or simply the resentment of a man overshadowed by a legend. Whatever the truth, one thing was certain. Jack McCall wanted revenge. And on August 2nd, 1876, he made the decision that would carve his name into history. Not as a gunslinger, not as an outlaw, but as the man who murdered Wild Bill Hickok. It was a hot August afternoon in Deadwood, South Dakota. The kind of day where the dust clung to your boots, and the air inside the saloons was thick with sweat, whiskey, and cigarette smoke. In Saloon Number 10, men gathered around wooden tables, wagering their fortunes, their luck rising and falling with the turn of a card. And among them sat Wild Bill Hickok, one of the most feared and respected men in the West. Hickok had always been careful. He never sat with his back exposed. He knew the price of reputation in the West. But on this day, fate played a cruel hand. The only available seat forced him to face the wall, his back to the room. He hesitated for a moment, the unease flickering across his face. But after a second's pause, he shrugged it off and sat down, his revolvers resting on his lap. Cards shuffled, laughter echoed, whiskey flowed. Hickok grinned as he picked up his hand. 2 black aces, 2 black eights, the hand that history would never forget. But as the game unfolded, unseen by him, danger lurked just a few feet away. Jack McCall stood near the bar, watching. His fingers twitched at his side. His breathing was shallow, his mind racing. He wasn't a gunslinger. He wasn't a lawman. He wasn't even a real outlaw. But in that moment, with a pistol in his shaking grip, he had convinced himself that he would be remembered. Slowly, he took a step forward, then another. Wild Bill Hickok, lost in the rhythm of the game, never noticed. He never saw the end coming. The saloon was alive with the sounds of clinking glasses, muffled laughter, and the shuffling of cards. But in an instant, that harmony was shattered. Without a word, Jack McCall stepped forward. His breath was ragged, his hands unsteady, but his resolve was set. The gun rose, its barrel glinting in the dim light. It was aimed at the back of Wild Bill Hickok's head, an execution, not a duel. Time seemed to slow. Some men at the bar, lost in conversation, never noticed. Others, perhaps sensing the shift in the air, glanced toward McCall, eyes widening as they realized what was about to happen. Then, a deafening crack, a burst of smoke. The stench of gunpowder filled the room as the bullet ripped through Hickok's skull, striking just behind his right ear. His body jerked, his head snapping forward. The poker table rattled as he slumped onto it, his cards slipping from his fingers. 2 black aces, 2 black eights, the dead man's hand. For a moment there was silence. Then chaos erupted. Gasps, screams, chairs scraping against the floor as men jumped to their feet. Someone cursed, someone reached for a gun, and in the center of it all, Wild Bill Hickok, the legend, the gunslinger, the lawman, lay motionless. In a single act of cowardice, McCall had killed more than a man. He had killed a legend. Jack McCall barely had time to savor what he had done. As Hickok's lifeless body lay on the poker table, the saloon erupted into chaos. Men lunged at McCall, fists flying, chairs scraping against the wooden floor. Some wanted revenge right then and there. Others, despite the lawlessness of the West, believed justice should be served the proper way. McCall tried to run. He shoved through the crowd, his gun still warm in his trembling hands. But he didn't make it far. Within minutes, he was tackled to the ground, his arms wrenched behind him. He would spend the night in a crude jail cell, but in his mind, he was no criminal. Instead, he bragged, telling anyone who would listen that he had done the town a favor. But justice in the Wild West was a fickle thing. The very next day, McCall was put on trial. A makeshift court convened inside a local building, hastily assembled and far from impartial. He stood before a panel of jurors, miners, traders, and frontiersmen who called Deadwood home. McCall claimed he killed Hickok in revenge, that Wild Bill had murdered his brother in cold blood. There was just one problem. McCall had no brother. Still, the trial was little more than a show. With no formal law in Deadwood, the jury reached a shocking verdict. Not guilty. Jack McCall walked free. But fate wasn't finished with him yet. Months later, U.S. authorities arrested McCall and put him on trial again. This time in a real courtroom in Yankton, South Dakota. This time, there would be no second chances. The verdict? Guilty. The sentence? Death by hanging. On March 1st, 1877, Jack McCall climbed the gallows. No crowds, no chaos, just the cold grip of justice. And as the noose tightened around his neck, his name faded into obscurity. Meanwhile, the legend of Wild Bill Hickok only grew. But Wild Bill Hickok's story didn't end in that saloon. His name became folklore, his legend woven into the very fabric of the American frontier. His gunfights, his fearless showdowns, and even his final game of poker became symbols of the Wild West itself. Yet his death remains a haunting reminder. Fortune in the frontier could change in an instant. Was it fate? Was it bad luck? Or was it simply the inevitable cost of living by the gun? Thanks for joining us on this journey into the Wild West. If you enjoyed this story, hit that subscribe button and join us as we continue uncovering history's hidden tales. Who's your favorite legend of the Wild West? Let us know in the comments below. Until next time, keep exploring the past with the Forgotten History Channel.